Man, I was wrong about the stock market. We're not necessarily going to talk about that today, but let's talk about forming a relationship with students. Let's get into it. All right, so going through my final evaluation, I was asked a question, and it's kind of the theme for this whole show right now. It was the beginning of a unit, and I asked a question on Google Classroom, like a warm-up question. I asked how their weekend was, and I asked how my students, like what they did during their weekend, right? Something like that. And I was asked why I did that and why I went with that choice. And it really kind of took me aback, like, I almost always do that. Like, I always ask questions about my students because I'm genuinely interested in them. But I wondered, why I don't know, I was really taken aback, and I figured it would be a great talk for this podcast and how I build a bond and relationship with students. So something that's been very hard to navigate and pretty difficult for me is the teacher before me. A lot of students had a tremendous bond with him. It's like a father figure to a lot of students. They looked up to him. He was a disciplinarian. And while I value discipline, I'm not necessarily a disciplinarian. That's not my main goal, right? I mean, I probably could be a little bit better with discipline, that sort of thing. I definitely look up to those teachers who run a very tight ship in their classes, and I think they're fantastically talented in that aspect. But something I've always prided myself with, and something I've always really not necessarily struggled, it's like the opposite, something I've always been proud of, is how I form a bond with students. And I think it's something that we as teachers miss a lot. And even as, if you're listening to this and you own a business, you miss this part a lot. It's important to form a bond with your workers. I mean, they're your workers. They're everything you have. They're the reason why your company is successful. Yeah, sure, maybe in the beginning it was because you were successful, but if you've gotten to a point where you have people who work for you, they're your everything. And at the end of the day, my students are my everything. They are something, without them I wouldn't have a job. Without their success I wouldn't have a job. A coach is only as good as his quarterback. Is only as good as his team. So, that being said, how are you going to make the right choices to get the better team? And yes, I can't fire a kid. I can't, do that, but I do kind of do that my own way, right? Kids can, if they're not going to participate, if they're going to participate at a very low level, be dangerous, then yeah, they're fired. They have to sit out, right? They have to maybe figure out what they're going through. Maybe they're going through something that I don't know, right? Sit it out. You can, you're fired. So it is. Tomorrow's a new day. Come back tomorrow. I'm the only job in the world where you get a brand new day the next day. But it really kind of took me aback and made me really think about things. Yeah, I could have asked a question related to the lesson. I could do a pre-test and stuff. I could have done a lot of things to really help and kind of test my students for the next level. I could have done a lot of things to make sure or to see if they were prepared, but I didn't. It's a brand new lesson, brand new unit. It's a Monday. A lot of kids do not like Mondays. Monday's a sign of another week of work. Most people don't like Mondays. In fact, when I ask students why or what day they like the most, a lot of kids like Friday, Saturday the most. Well, I asked the least favorite day, a lot of Sunday, a ton of Monday, and a little bit of Thursday came up. And I thought that was really interesting statistics. Right now, it's not really backed by anything. You can probably get a way better statistic, but I figured it was pretty interesting because a lot of my kids do not like Mondays. So why start Monday rearing ahead? Why start Monday with a very tough question? Now, understand, very tough question is not necessarily a bad thing, but I mean, I want to get away from that, right? Because there's pros and cons. I can ask a question, gauge their knowledge, and figure out where to go in my unit, and that's totally fine with me. Or I can ask a question about how their weekend was and really open up to them and have them open up to me and become a little bit more on their level and be a little bit more vulnerable and vice versa, right? And gain a little bit in terms of trust and sort of like a relationship that formed, right? Like a boss-employee relationship. I've had plenty of bosses I've worked for that don't check on the herd. They just forge ahead with work. It's work, and that's it. You just come to work, and that's it. But I don't really work like that. I mean, I can't. I have to ask kids how they are doing. I have to check on my herd because at the end of the day, they are the ones that's going to show how successful I am. There is nothing that I do that's going to show how successful I am. The kids are going to do that. The kids are going to succeed. The kids are going to build things. The kids are going to show how successful I am at my teaching. And if kids don't buy into everything I say, if they don't trust everything I say, then it's not going to work. They have to be able to trust what I'm going to say or what I'm going to teach them. If they can't trust my skill, my attitude, my respect, then they're not going to be able to trust me because I just listed everything that was me. And And I think it's crazy. I think it's crazy to say. It really kind of questioned me. I was very confused. And I know it's just something to think about. I know I'm definitely thinking about it way too much. It wasn't meant in a negative way. It was just kind of a why do I do that? But that's my why, you know? Do I value a student relationship or class relationship over, curriculum? At times I do. Yeah, I think there's a point or a purpose for that. I think we're only as good as our students, and if our students cannot be good or if our students cannot feel good, then they're not going to show up. I think that's the biggest part, is that we don't have kids that show up. And at the end of the day, administrators need to be okay with students showing up. And I think they are okay, right? That's how schools get their money, at least in California, is attendance. But I'm not going to want to show up to a place where I don't feel valued. So how do I make students feel valued? Well, in addition to asking those kinds of, wouldn't say necessarily personal questions, but kind of personal, right? In addition to that, I always read the answers to their questions or their responses. And I always say their names. I say, hey, Jared, great job with this. Like, oh, Jared, you went skiing this weekend? Oh, sick. Or it's always positive behavior reinforcement. I remember student teaching and people would laugh about positive behavior reinforcement and they would think that it's kind of stupid or whatever. And I kind of get where they're coming from, but I don't necessarily reinforce positive behavior. I just reinforce positivity in general. A student that's going to answer a question has taken a leap. They have taken a leap in trust, and the trust is now put in your hands. Whether the question is right or wrong, they have taken that trust to answer the question. It's up to you to figure out how you want to answer the question. If you disregard it or belittle the student, then he may not have that trust to answer another question. If you reward the student for a wrong answer, he may have the trust, but he has a wrong answer, and he's not going to perform well. How do you get around that? How do you give constructive criticism to a student? Me, I thank the student for answering. Right? Hey man, thanks Jared. That's a good response. Thank you for responding. That's not quite the road we want to go on. Let's think about this. And so what I do is I ask the question again, but differently. Just like you would do if a student doesn't understand the question. You have to understand that if a student asks a question and they don't comprehend or they get the wrong answer, they probably did not understand the question to begin with. That's why they came up with this wrong answer, or they just don't know. But let's not necessarily go to the or he just might not know stage. Let's turn it back a little bit to he may not understand the question. So rephrase it to him and let him ponder, let him think. Now, if the same student struggles again, has the wrong answer again, okay, what I'll typically do is I will typically have another student be like, hey, someone drop the answer in the chat and let's see what you guys got. Let's see what you guys have. Someone just say the answer. If we were here in person, I would be like, okay, Johnny, what's the answer? Tell me what the answer is, or what do you get, Johnny? That sort of thing, right? But in distance learning, hey, put the answer in the chat bar. Let's see what we got. Put the answers in. Let's see who can get the right answer fastest. Then we talk about the answers and why one is wrong and why one is right, depending on how close they are. Now, if you ask a kid what kind of saw blade to use and he says banana, then yeah, we got a little bit of an issue. He's just answering for the sake of answering, and we need to kind of address that a little bit differently, right? Now, some teachers attack that with, anger, frustration maybe. Other teachers attack it with just kind of laughing you off and playing you on. I don't necessarily entertain it that much. I'm like, banana, what the heck? And then I move on. But it's giving them a little bit of it, because at the end of the day, a lot of students say stupid things because they want attention, right? They want that attention, that sort of thing. You can feed them a little bit of attention, but not distracting the whole thing from the class, right? You can be like, banana, that's weird, and then move on. So he gets a little bit of attention. But then you spend some time talking about the right answer, and then hopefully that will coax the student who wrote banana to give the right answer next time because he saw that you gave more attention. Now, there is no scientific evidence backing that up. That's just my own personal feeling on that one. There's negative scientific backing up. But I thought it was interesting. I thought it's interesting to hear what teachers have to deal with and what they say to students and how it matters what they're saying. I had a master teacher tell me that if you ask students a question and they say the wrong answer, they are probably going to remember the wrong answer because that's the first answer their brain went to. And that kind of blew my mind because he's definitely talking about me. I mean, not literally, but he's talking about me. Like, I'll always remember the answer that I came up with, even if it's the wrong or right answer. So his method was you ask a question, give the answer right away, continue on teaching, and then come back to that question and check their knowledge or check for their understanding. It's almost like spoon feeding just a little bit and see if they can and give you the answer again afterwards. But to each their own. That may work for some people. That may work, not well for other people. It just really depends on what works in your classroom. I'm not one to judge. I'm one just to talk about, some things going on, that sort of thing. I cannot fathom or cannot figure out where that was going. Back to the evaluation. I couldn't figure out where that was going. Interacting with students is something that I've always prided myself with, and something I acknowledged was going to be my main thing that I worked on this year. As school becomes, I guess, more in person now that we're online, I wouldn't say struggled, but I really focused heavily on forming a classroom culture virtually. Because at the end of the day, the kids that come to this class don't necessarily come for the curriculum. Some come for the shop, some come for me. But now that they're online, they're not getting the shop. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to try to give them as much possible shop experience as I possibly can so that they can feel just a little bit better, just a little bit more confident in the class. They can be like, well, I used to look forward going to this class because of shop, but now I have nothing to look forward to. Well, hopefully now they can say, I look forward going to this class because I get to see one of Mr. G's TikToks, or I get to, see a real life YouTube video. And that's how I film my classes. They're like a real life YouTube video. We go out in the shop, we try things out. Tomorrow I'm gonna be lighting wood on fire because we're going through safety in the fire unit, that sort of thing. They get to see a whole lot of what we're doing and kind of the purpose of everything. And I think that's probably one of the coolest parts, is that they really get to see my classroom from a completely different perspective. If they were here in person, then they would see it and understand it from also a different perspective, something that's a little bit more personal, a little bit more hands-on. But now when they're online, they get to see the shop from the way I get to see it. And I think that's pretty incredible. And that goes for any of your classes. If you're teaching science, whatever, they have an opportunity to see the lab, see whatever you're offering from your perspective. I wish I could put my phone on my hat or like my chest and just walk around. They can have a feeling of what it's like to be Mr. G for a day, right? Or Mr. G for a period. But they get that opportunity now. They really understand what it feels like. They get to see exactly what my hands do, right? Just being in that view. And I think that goes really much hand in hand with those warm-up questions and just asking kids how they're doing. They really feel the need for one-on-one connection. Now, my students used to get one-on-one connections when we were in the shop doing that sort of thing. I would grade their projects one-on-one. I knew every kid. I knew exactly what their flaws were. I knew exactly how they built their projects. This kid always drives his nails too much and marks up his wood. This kid never drives his nails enough. There's always a lip hanging off of the project. Well, now I don't get that. They don't really get that one-on-one feel. So how do I do that? Well, by giving them a window into my eyes, if that makes sense. Walking around with my camera, walking around with my phone on the call so they can feel what it feels like to walk around the shop virtually. Half my kids know what it's like. They've taken shop before with me in person last year. But the other half have no idea what this class is like. And most of your kids, if you're listening to this and you're a teacher, especially in California or the United States that are doing online learning still, they have no clue what your class is about. They have no clue who you are. Yeah, we do those little silly activities in the first week of school, but do they really listen? They really opened up? I don't think so. I think 3 weeks into the year is when they really start to open up. Now, understand my situation before you're like, wait a minute, this is second semester. My school went to a 4x4 block, so we had 4 classes one semester. Now, this next semester, we have 4 new classes. So we essentially started over just to make the load a little bit easier on students and potentially teachers. But I wonder how this is going to change education. How are teachers going to change? How is educating students going to change now that we're online with a quotation mark around it? How does it change? How does it affect the teaching profession? I don't know. That's what's going to be the question that we're going to have to ask ourselves. But what I do know is I'm going to still keep forming bonds with students. I'm going to make sure students know that I appreciate them, and I'm going to make sure students understand that I appreciate every single thing they do. I want to thank you all for listening. If you heard the last one about stocks, it's still wild. I don't really have too much of an update besides that it's going up and down. I have no clue what's going on anymore, but it's completely wild with the stocks. Hey, I want to thank you all for listening. I appreciate every single one of you, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day. If you're just starting it, have a great day. If you're just ending it, we'll see you guys next time. I appreciate every single one of you. Peace! This has been an episode of the Chip Happens podcast. Thank you all for listening, and I will catch you next week with another exciting episode.